Ancient Rome. The very name echoes with the tramp of legions, the proclamations of emperors, and the whispers of senators in marble halls. It was an empire built not just on the sword, but on the unyielding foundation of law and order, the Pax Romana. The 12 Tables, the foundation of their legal system, was a testament to a society obsessed with process, justice, and the rights of the citizen. A Roman citizen had dignitas, an inherent worth that set him apart from the rest of the world. He could not be scourged without trial, nor condemned without due process. And yet, this civilization of law and order was also a civilization of brutal spectacle. Its most enduring symbol is the cross, a slow, agonizing, and public death reserved for slaves, rebels, and the enemies of the state. It was a warning, a piece of political theater designed to display the absolute authority of the empire over the bodies of those who defied it. For centuries, crucifixion has been considered the zenith of Roman cruelty, a fate so feared that its very name was a curse. But what if there was a punishment even the Romans considered worse? A sentence reserved for a crime so unnatural, so abhorrent, that it was seen as a contamination of the divine order itself. A crime so vile that it stripped a Roman citizen of his dignitas, his humanity, and his very right to exist. This crime was parricide, the murder of one's own father. And its punishment was a ritualistic journey into darkness, a sentence that began with the scourge and ended in a watery grave, shared with a collection of panicked, living animals. This is not a legend. It is a chillingly real procedure, documented in the law books and histories of Rome itself. This is the story of Poena Cullei, the punishment of the sack. It is the story of how the most ordered civilization in history dealt with its most unspeakable crime by devising its most horrifying death. To understand the horror of the punishment, one must first understand the horror of the crime. The Roman world was governed by a strict patriarchal structure known as the patria potestas, the power of the father. The paterfamilias, the eldest male head of the family, held absolute, lifelong authority over his household. This power was nearly absolute. He owned all family property. His children, no matter how old, could not enter into contracts without his consent. He arranged their marriages, and in the early, foundational days of the Republic, he held the legal power of life and death over them. While this power was rarely used in later periods, its legal and symbolic existence was never questioned. The paterfamilias was the family's priest, its judge, and its king. His life was sacred, the cornerstone of the family, which was itself the foundational brick of the entire Roman state. To murder one's own father was therefore not just a homicide. It was an act of profound treason against the natural order, the state, and the gods. The word itself, parricidium, was loaded with a unique dread. It was a crime that polluted the world, an act so unnatural it was believed to anger the gods and threaten the very stability of Rome. A Roman citizen who committed parricide was seen as having severed his ties to humanity. He was a monster, and Roman law decreed that a monster must not be allowed to die a human death, nor be buried in Roman soil. The claim that this punishment was designed to erase the offender from existence is supported by every element of its grotesque ritual. The procedure began immediately after the guilty verdict was passed in the court. The condemned was led away, and the first stage of his dehumanization began. His head was forcibly shrouded in a bag made from a wolf's hide, the pellis lupina. This was a potent symbol. The wolf, while revered in the founding myth of Romulus and Remus, was also the ultimate creature of the wild, an animal outside the bounds of human law and Roman domesticity. By covering the parricide's head, the state was declaring that he was no longer a man, but a feral beast, unfit to look upon the Roman sky or be recognized by his fellow citizens. His identity was the first thing to be taken from him. Next, his feet were shod in solea lignea, crude wooden clogs. This, too, was a deliberate and symbolic act. It was to ensure that in his final walk to the prison, his feet would not touch the sacred soil of Rome. He was being ritually separated from the land, the first step in his ultimate expulsion from the world itself. He was then led to the prison, often the Tullianum, a dark subterranean dungeon where he would await the final horrifying stage of his sentence. The law was meticulous. The execution could not be a simple affair. It was to be a complex, symbolic, and terrifying spectacle, a religious exorcism as much as a legal proceeding. The punishment was not merely to kill him, but to perform a ritual of purification for the state, which his crime had so deeply polluted. The evidence for this is found in the very name of the punishment, Poena Cullei. The culleus was a large, heavy sack sewn from the hide of a single ox. It was made to be strong and, crucially, airtight and watertight. This was not to protect the occupant, but to ensure that his drowning would be slow and that his contaminated corpse would not touch the pure waters of the river or sea as he died. It was a tomb of leather, a portable vessel of damnation. The true horror of the punishment of the sack, however, lay not in the drowning alone, but in the unholy company the condemned was forced to keep. Ancient sources, from the time of the Republic through to the legal codes of the late Empire, describe the ritual in chilling, methodical detail. After a period of waiting in the dungeon, the condemned was brought forth. Before being sewn into the sack, he was to be joined by a collection of living animals. The specific menagerie varied slightly in different historical accounts, but the most frequently cited and legally codified combination is found in the Digest of the Emperor Justinian, a 6th century compilation of centuries of Roman law. The code states that the parricide is to be thrown into the sea, enclosed in a sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. Let us pause to consider the sheer, calculated terror of this. The condemned man, already scourged and publicly shamed, is thrust into the suffocating, pitch-black confines of the leather sack. Then, one by one, the animals are thrown in with him. A panicked dog, a creature of instinct, biting and snarling in the disorienting darkness. A rooster, a bird of aggression, flapping wildly, its spurs and beak becoming accidental weapons. A venomous snake, a cold, writhing presence, striking at anything it touches. And a monkey, an animal known for its intelligence and dexterity, now reduced to a frenzy of desperate, primal fear. Finally, the sack is sewn shut. The horror of these moments is almost unimaginable. In the minutes before the water begins to seep in, the man is not alone with his thoughts of repentance or dread, but is trapped in a chaotic whirlwind of animalistic terror. He is being bitten, clawed, and potentially envenomated in a lightless, airless space. The sounds of barking, crowing, hissing, and shrieking would be deafening. The smell of fear from 5 different creatures, mingled with the stench of blood and waste, would be overwhelming. The frantic, desperate struggle for survival of 4 different species, all locked in a tomb of leather. This was not a quick execution. It was a meticulously crafted symphony of suffering, a prelude to the final, slow agony of drowning. The claim that each animal was a deliberate symbol is central to understanding the Roman legal and religious mind. This was not a random collection of creatures, chosen for their ferocity alone. Each was a carefully selected symbol, designed to reflect the nature of the parricide's crime and compound his spiritual pollution. The evidence for this symbolism is drawn from Roman interpretations of the natural world and their place within it. The dog, a common household guardian and a symbol of unwavering loyalty, was included because the parricide had committed the ultimate act of disloyalty, murdering the very master of his household. The dog's presence was a constant, biting reminder of the fidelity he had betrayed. The rooster, a creature known to fight its own kin, and in some traditions, to not even spare its own parents, mirrored the parricide's unnatural aggression against his own blood. It was a symbol of blind, familial violence. Furthermore, the rooster was the herald of the dawn, a creature tied to the sun god Apollo. Its inclusion in this pit of darkness was a cruel irony, a symbol that for the condemned there would be no new day. The viper was a more primal symbol. In Roman mythology and folklore, snakes were often seen as chthonic creatures, beings born from the corrupted earth, symbols of chaos, poison, and evil. Some ancient authors, like Pliny the Elder, recorded the belief that vipers killed their own mothers upon being born, making the snake a direct, horrifying parallel to the parricide's crime. Its venomous presence in the sack was a literal injection of poison into an already poisoned environment. The monkey, or ape, was perhaps the most unsettling and insulting addition. The Romans saw apes as a grotesque caricature of humanity, a creature that looked almost human, but lacked true reason, morality, and dignitas. By sealing an ape in the sack, the Romans were making a final, damning statement. The parricide, by killing his father, had become a twisted mockery of a man, no better than a witless imitative beast. The combination of these four animals created a microcosm of a world turned upside down, a profane parody of nature, sealed in a sack with the man who had caused the corruption. This horrifying ritual was not a rare or forgotten practice from the mists of early Roman history. It was the law of the land for centuries, and its application is recorded in multiple historical accounts. The Roman historian Valerius Maximus, writing in the 1st century AD, records the execution of a man named Publius Malleolus, who was convicted of murdering his mother around 100 BC. He was the first, according to these records, to suffer the full formal punishment. Immediately after his conviction, his head was covered with the wolf-skin bag, he was placed in the wooden clogs, and after being sewn into the sack with the animals, he was dragged by oxen to the river and cast into the sea. The severity of the punishment was a topic of debate, even among the Romans themselves. The Emperor Hadrian, generally considered one of the good emperors in the 2nd century AD, found the punishment so extreme that he briefly modified the law. He decreed that parricides should instead be thrown to wild beasts in the arena. His reasoning, it seems, was that even being torn apart by lions was a more straightforward, and perhaps more humane, death than the prolonged, multi-layered agony of the sack. However, this leniency did not last. His successors reinstated the original punishment, deeming it a necessary terror. More shockingly, the Emperor Constantine, the first Christian emperor, not only confirmed the practice in the 4th century, but increased its severity. In a world supposedly turning towards mercy and forgiveness, Constantine ordered that the parricide should still be sewn into the sack, but that the single viper should be replaced with a knot of multiple snakes to increase the certainty of envenomation before drowning. It was only under the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century that the punishment was finally officially replaced with being burned alive in the arena, a fate seen as a more direct and perhaps less symbolically fraught end. For over 600 years, the sack and its living contents remained the ultimate expression of Roman legal terror. The ultimate claim that the punishment was designed to deny the offender a place in the cosmos is central to its purpose. Roman beliefs about the afterlife were deeply connected to the earth. A proper burial, with the body interred in the ground, was absolutely essential for the spirit, or manes, to find peace in the underworld. Without a grave, a soul was doomed to wander the earth as a restless, tormented ghost, a larva, forever shunned by both the living and the dead. The punishment of the sack was a systematic denial of every single element of a Roman death. The condemned was not allowed to touch the earth in his final moments, hence the wooden clogs. He was not allowed to breathe the Roman air or see the Roman sky, hence the wolf-skin hood. His body was not to be buried in the earth, nor even cremated on a pyre where his ashes could be collected. By being cast into the sea or a flowing river, his body would be carried away, lost forever, leaving no place for his family, if any would still claim him. to perform the necessary funerary rites. This was the ultimate damnation. The parricide was not just killed. He was expunged from the record of existence. He was denied a grave, denied remembrance, and his soul was condemned to eternal restlessness. The physical terror of the biting animals and the slow drowning was just the prelude to an eternity of spiritual homelessness. A sack did not just contain a man and 4 animals. It contained a soul being deliberately and methodically erased from the universe. As the Roman Empire grew, the punishment was carried to its farthest corners. Legal records from Roman Egypt and Gaul confirm its practice. It became a symbol not just of Roman justice, but of the empire's absolute authority to define reality, itself to declare a man no longer human, and to cast him out from the world of the living and the dead. There is a final, haunting layer to this story. The law, in its full and terrible form, was the ideal. But in practice, it was not always feasible. In remote provinces, or even in Rome itself, finding a monkey or a viper on short notice could be difficult. In these cases, the law allowed for a simpler, though no less final execution. The condemned was simply sewn into the sack and drowned. But the idea, the full horror of the original ritual, remained in the legal and cultural imagination. It was the ultimate threat, a story told to children to instill the absolute, inviolable sanctity of the paterfamilias. It serves as a chilling reminder that law is not always about justice. It is often about order and the violent maintenance of a belief system. The Romans, the great architects of law and engineering, were also the architects of this meticulously designed ritual of horror. They did not see it as barbaric. They saw it as a necessary cleansing. They believed that a crime that tore at the very fabric of nature required a punishment that cast the offender out of nature itself, denying him earth, air, and fire. And so, we are left with the image. A leather sack, heavy and struggling, dragged by oxen to the edge of a bridge over the dark waters of the Tiber. The muffled, frantic sounds from within, a symphony of animal and human terror, are cut short by a single heavy splash. The sack bobs for a moment in the current before it is pulled under, sinking into the depths. The Romans believed that by this act they were restoring balance to the world. But what they truly created was a testament to the depths of human cruelty, a punishment so profoundly terrible that it haunts the pages of history, a silent scream from a leather tomb lost forever in the cold, flowing darkness.